Hello, and welcome to the office of the president-elect in 2032. I'm just kidding. um, I wanted to make a video today because it's been a minute, and I got kind of fired up here and just had some ideas, I guess, that I had like nobody to really explain to at length because I'm at my house. I'm, on my own right now, and it's really not worth it to me to sit here and type it out to somebody in a text message or something like that just to like vent. But I figured I could turn it into something productive. Have a I just wanted to verbalize what I'm trying to think about, I guess, to see if it sounds right when I say it. Um, Basically, just to give you the context, this morning I woke up and I live, of course, with my mom because I'm a winner. And we were talking from as soon as I woke up. We always have a pretty crazy conversation. And I watched. I watched this morning. I watched a video of Joe Biden delivering remarks on his foreign policy goals coming into his term, and I feel iffy about them. I think that everything sounds fine or good. Well, not everything, but I think generally rejoining like the World Health Organization, the Paris Climate Accords, like these are like no-brainers. Like yes, of course we should be part of the global community that is working to solve global issues because a lot of the issues we're facing at this point in time are global. We can't just ignore the fact that the rest of the world exists because it affects us so greatly. I think COVID-19 proved that a guy can eat a bat in China and soon we're all stuck inside our houses. It's not enough to just isolate yourself as a country and pretend that none of the other things are happening and that we're just going to make it all happen over here. We can't do that. I think Joe has President Biden. I shouldn't call him Joe. Um, President Biden has some okay ideas. I feel like the Democrat platform of like we always need to intervene on shit is a little bit tiresome. I didn't think that the Democratic Party would be the one of government intervention all the time, like abroad. It really shouldn't be, um, but here we are. He pledged to impose a ceasefire in Yemen. I think that's fine. Well, I think that's wonderful, really. The the backside of that I didn't like was that he was promising to continue to support Saudi Arabian. Um, I don't remember what he said, like safeguard their security and like their ability to thrive as like a country and a people, kind of painting them as some kind of victim in the sense that they're being attacked and that they need like help. But of course, that's not true. Saudi Arabia is a huge part of the war in Yemen. I mean, the war in Yemen is realistically it's a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And for us to say that we're going to end the war in Yemen or that we're going to impose a ceasefire or that we're going to stop this from being a global issue in a huge catastrophe that's ruining people's lives, but in the same breath to recommend that we support Saudi Arabia, who is a perpetrator in a sense of this war, and to fund them or to support them or whatever he means by that, I still think it's kind of controversial. Anyway, I was telling my mom I didn't even get to have that kind of nuanced opinion like expressed before I was like, well, I feel kind of iffy about what he said. And she of course, being a Trump supporter, jumps right on it and says, I think he's doing everything wrong. And I asked her, what exactly, can you name anything that he's actually doing? Or can you give me any specifics on that? Like, what do you think he's doing wrong? And she mumbled something pipeline. And I know that she gets her opinions from Facebook. I know that her friends just tell her what to think. She reads memes, and that's like her extent of her political knowledge. So, something pipeline. I have to, I guess, infer from that what she probably means, which is the general sentiment like, you know, crushing the pipeline or like getting rid of nixing the plans to build this pipeline is just going to cost the US jobs, and we're going to be dependent on somebody else's oil, and it's going to be a huge problem, and we're basically like hamstringing ourselves in terms of like prosperity, independence. Like, I get that. Whatever. It's a classic conservative view that we really need to protect the oil industry, and that we can't move past it. I disagree so much. I think that climate change is one of the most important things that we can be focusing on right now. I think if I were to run as president, then I would be running on a platform of climate change, regardless of how popular that is. I don't expect it to be popular, but I mean, I would rather die on that hill and know that I was right than to pretend that it's not an issue, and then later on we're all living underground or some shit. I don't know. But I mean, climate change to me is such an important issue. I truly believe that climate change is man made. I think that there are climate cycles, and of course, like, things get warm, things get cold. Ice Age happened like 10,000 years ago, but that's not the point. The point is that in the last 200 years, that the climate has skyrocketed, things have become much more volatile, and that the Earth is becoming less and less suitable as a habitat for human beings. We don't have anywhere else to go. I think that it's a pipe dream to believe that Daddy Musk is going to fly us all to Mars and that we're all going to be okay. I don't think that I would rather live on Mars than Earth. So I would like to see that we can make a concerted effort to clean this place up before we all kill ourselves. And that would be my number one priority if I were to be like in office, or if I had any power in this country at all. That's what I would be focusing on. And probably, now that I think about it, I should be focusing on in terms of like my career or something like that. I'd love to get into something along those lines. It's kind of hard to figure like where I fit into that. Um, but instead of doing anything productive, I sat down and made a list of my biggest. I guess the prompt of this thought experiment is, what would I run on if I were the president of the United States? What are my issues? What are the biggest priorities? Like, what would I be promising, or what would I be talking about in my campaign, and then in my eventual successful election, and then subsequent term? I came up with four main points that I think are the biggest issues that we face as a country, and then a couple of sub points to kind of address like specifics, or like talk about some potential solutions. First, like I mentioned, is climate change. I think that it's the biggest problem that we face. I think that it is an existential threat at this point. If we don't change now, we will surely kill ourselves. And I don't mean that humanity will be extinct. I think that humanity will survive. But worst case scenario, humanity is going to be like a small sliver of what it used to be, surviving on, radioactive canned food in like some kind of post-apocalyptic universe. I don't want that. I don't think it has to be that way. I think that things will get rough here no matter what we do at this point, because it's already pretty far along. But I think we can stop it from being as bad as it could be. And some of the ways that I think that we should are heavy intervention into the way we produce energy. This all stems from the pipeline conversation with my mom. I think that the pipeline, yes, I get it, like energy, money, industry, like we need these things, but I don't think that it's so important that we get the money from oil, or that we extract the oil and that's the only solution. I think that solar energy is a field with so much potential. And I think that wind energy is another field with so much potential that's already taken off in Texas, like in a huge way. We need to double down on those things and to produce more of our energy in a sustainable way. I think that just like when we invented the internet, like newspaper companies weren't printing off so many newspapers, like oil jobs are going to go away if we invent a new and better product. And I think that that's what we have on our hands. And for somebody to just, throw a tantrum because it's going to be a problem that there are people out of jobs, like there's always people out of jobs. I mean, taxi drivers went away when Uber was invented. Like, creative destruction is a part of economics, and unregulated economics are, that's a hallmark of conservative values, but at the same time, they want to put a restraint on our progress because they want to protect the jobs of the oil industry. It just seems hypocritical. It seems backwards. I think we're holding ourselves back holding on to this oil pipeline when you really take it at face value, running an oil pipeline through the countryside of the United States and through Native American reservations is like something a bad guy from a movie would do. Like it's straight up it's just not right. I think that we need to keep our countryside as pristine as possible, and that's another point that I wanted to bring up was that we should really be leveraging our huge amount of land that we have in a productive way that's going to help the earth. Just like the Congo and just like the Amazon are huge swaths of rainforest that produce so much oxygen and capture so much carbon by sucking CO2 right out of the air. I think that we could do something like that in the United States with our land. We have so much nature and so much open countryside that could be used in a more productive way. And I what I mean by that is encouraging the growth of more substantial plant life. I think planting trees, as like naive as it sounds, I do think that planting trees is a productive activity that can help curb climate change and the raising of the temperature of the planet. We're constantly thinking about like emissions, like reducing emissions. Like of course we should be reducing emissions, but I don't think that that's enough. At this point, the emissions that are already in the atmosphere are so much that it's a greenhouse effect that's going to run away. We have to be removing emissions, and we're trying to like engineer this machine that sucks CO2 out of the air, and I think we already did. It's called a tree. Like trees are literally designed to suck CO2 out of the air and to deposit carbon into the soil in the form of the roots that they have and the leaves that they drop. They're literally carbon capture machines. And to plant a ton of trees and to encourage the growth of national forests would be a wonderful way to encourage the reduction of emissions that have already been produced. I think we should be the guardians of our nature, and that we should not only be protecting them and preserving nature, but we should be encouraging the growth, and the forests that we already have should be encouraged to grow, expand, and become more forested than they already are. I think we can pack as much plant life into the United States as possible. It won't be a huge impact on our own environment or lifestyle, but in the places that we don't have very many people, we should be promoting the growth of nature in a way that it's vibrant. We should be doing this so that we can protect our nature, of course, but also the biodiversity of our climate, just the animals and the plants that we have. We should be creating huge havens of just vibrant animal and plant life, and I think that that would be it would be, of course, beneficial for our environment, but I think that it could also be a wonderful thing for our tourism industry. If the United States has we already do have like unparalleled nature. It's just a beautiful country that we have, but to encourage that and to grow that and let it just thrive would be, I think, so good for our world, but also for ourselves. And it's a no-brainer to me. I mean, it's not expensive to plant a tree, and it kind of does all the work itself. I think we need to be doing more of that. Second issue I have that I think is on everyone's mind is that the government is not helpful. The government doesn't do what it's supposed to be doing. I think everyone can agree on that. And I think that conservatives, Republicans, Trump supporters, whatever you want to call them, as well as liberals, Democrats, socialists, like anyone in the United States can generally agree that the government isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. When we ask it to do things, it comes out with something way too late and like totally half-hearted. It sucks. I think there's a lot that we can do to fix the government, and that we can get things moving along a lot quicker, or we can get things moving along a lot better. There's a couple of things I wanted to address. First and foremost is gerrymandering. If you've ever looked at voting districts and a map of voting districts, I'm not going to include one here because I don't know how, but Google it. just look at your voting district, in fact, and look at how the map doesn't look like, all right, here's a square of population of people in Dallas, and then here's Garland, and then here's Plano. Like, it's fucked. It's there's going to be like a mass and then like one road that is the voting district, and then like on both sides of that road is like some other districts, but like that one road is the district, and then over here there's a neighborhood that's also part of the original district. Like, things are truly fucked. People aren't in districts. They cut up the population in such a way that it makes representation so convoluted. It makes it so that a lot of people's votes don't really matter. They have it all set up in a certain way that it's almost impossible for your your district to truly represent the interests of the people, because the districts aren't cut up in a way that's realistic. I think there's a simple solution, and it's just simple math. If a voting district is an area, then the surface area or the perimeter of that district should not be over a certain ratio. We shouldn't have a district that's like little pockets connected by little lines, and it's all just like a collection of like places all over DFW just to collect like one voting district that's going to vote together. It should be very simply a ratio that makes it so that the voting district can only be so oblong or so pulled apart from itself that it has to be restrained to a certain kind of like continuity, like a continuous, piece. And I think just tweaking the math on that, or putting some restraints on how we cut up the voting districts, is really going to change how people feel their vote works, because it's going to make it so that areas vote together in blocks, and it should be that the people around you are part of your voting district. Community should be the ones who are deciding on their own shit. Who represents them? Some of the issues that come up. It shouldn't be that this neighborhood here, that neighborhood here, this part of town here, that part of town there, all vote together on shit that doesn't affect each other. It just doesn't make sense like that. I think that we have to reanalyze how we have our like literally how we have our democracy mapped out. And we can do that simply. I think that creating a ratio of area to surface area would solve that completely. It's super simple. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, except that a lot of people are going to oppose it just because it's a challenge to the status quo. I think additionally that term limits for politicians need to be in place. I don't think it's right that we have politicians that can run again and again and again for like 30 years. The president is a two-term situation. It wasn't originally, but George Washington, the first president, he did 2 terms, and he said, you know what, that's good. We don't need a king. We just need a president. And like the next president will come along and do his thing, and he'll reflect the current views of the country, and then we'll have another president after that. And he did that for the role of the president because he had the power to do so. And he set the precedent that wasn't made official for a long time, but people continue to follow that because the logic is sound. He wasn't a congressman, though. So congressmen, had they been as morally just as George Washington in the first years of the country, I think would have done the same thing. They would have also taken 2 terms and been done with it. Now Congress have different term lengths. I believe it's like 6 years or whatever, but they should also be held to a term limit. I think just like we do for the president. We don't have the same president for forever, like Vladimir Putin or whatever. We have a hard limit on how long the president can be the president. So even if they're good, they got to go away at some point, and we got to get some fresh ideas in there, a new perspective, a better reflection of what the country currently is, instead of getting stagnated in these people who just run for life. And putting term limits on every government official should be a thing. I think House of Representatives, Senate, Supreme Court, everyone should be in and out of there. We shouldn't have people who are like 95 years old and they've been in there since they were 40 and they've just always been the same way. It's holding us back. I think that having people like that is a backwards and shitty part of our government. Additionally, I don't really have an answer for this one, but more of just like an issue that I wanted to bring up is that our elections need help. There needs to be some transparency and there needs to be a guarantee of security. Because whether it was 2016 and Donald Trump won and you thought that that was hacked by Russia or China or whatever, or if it was 2020 and you thought that Joe Biden stole the election, no matter what side of everything you're on, there's obviously an issue here. I mean, people on both sides of the aisle are having trouble believing what we're being told. And I don't have an answer to this, but I do think that this is an issue that we need to focus on the underlying aspects of instead of like, is Donald Trump the real president of the United States? Like, did he get the election stolen because he was able to get help from Russia or like whatever? It's not about the individual person and it's not about the individual election. To argue about it in 2020 when it's like Donald Trump lost the election and now we want to talk about it is like not fair because these elections have been going on for forever. Well, I mean, since the beginning of the United States. And yes, there's been issues in the past, but like you can't continue to vote every 4 years and then when your guy wins, you're happy for it. And then when he loses, now you're going to call election fraud. Like, obviously everybody has some issues with it when their guy loses and then when their guy wins they seem to gloss over the fact that it could have been fraudulent. I personally believe that the elections are there's probably some election fraud going on. I mean, if an individual person is making the counts of the votes, like, of course they can fudge the numbers, or, like, honestly, they could just make a mistake. Like, I don't know. I don't think that every single vote was counted accurately or that we found all of the votes or that every single vote contributed to the rightful decision of the elector with the electorate college that is bullshit in and of itself. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that everybody would feel better if the elections were more secure and if they were more transparent. And I think that's exactly what needs to happen is we can't be arguing about individual elections and individual candidates and whether or not there was a scandal with Russia or China or whatever. We have to take a step back and say, okay, our democracy is founded on elections. And that's the entire idea of our country is that we don't have a king, we elect our representatives. And if we can't trust that the representatives that we elect are the ones that we actually chose, then we've got a really big problem. Like, that's fundamental to the United States. So I think that ensuring that people at least feel good about the election system is an extremely important point, and I think that we need to address that moving forward, or else 2024, here we go again. Donald Trump is running for re-election against Joe Biden, who's running for re-election, and we're going to have the same fight we just had, and it's going to be the same bullshit issues. No matter who wins, the election was stolen. No one's going to be happy about it, and it's going to be a huge fucking issue where there's people storming the Capitol and getting their fucking face shot. We shouldn't have that. I think we can do better than that. And I don't know how that works or what that looks like, but there are plenty of ideas that I'm sure that we can borrow. I mean, we trust our banks to hold our money, and we expect every day that when we wake up that the money's still going to be there. We trust I don't know who the fuck we trust. But that's kind of part of the problem. Like, we need to instill some trust. We need to prove the validity of some things. And I think that we need to take a step back and look at like logic and facts, and we need to look at data, and we need to prove that some of these things are reflective of reality, or else we're all just going off of narratives and hearsay. And I think that that's kind of the point that we're at, is this kind of post-truth society where like everyone believes what they want to believe and you can't tell them any different, and that's really scary because some people believe some crazy shit. I don't know what the answer is to that, and that might be a whole other video, is like a post-truth society conversation. But I think that if we're going to continue as a democracy and if we're going to continue as a country, we really need to address the transparency and the validity of our elections. Whether or not you think that Joe Biden won the presidency, I think that it would be helpful for the winners and the losers of that election to totally get that straight. Because if you're against election transparency, even if you're the winner of that election and you're like, no, don't look into it, he won. Like, I voted for Joe Biden and he won, and I don't want anybody like check on that. Like, you're being dishonest too. So we really need to look into it. I don't know what the answer is. I feel like we could do so much better, and we really should. Um, Finally, well, I'm moving a lot slower than I thought I was, but maybe I'll cut the last one because it doesn't. I'm, I don't make much sense. But finally, I think that inequality is a huge issue in this country. We have such a problem where there's so many people in this country that can barely put food on the table, or access to their access to things that I would consider rights are limited, and it sucks. For instance, my mom works at a grocery store. She works almost 40 hours every week, but I don't think she works quite 40 hours. They like keep her around 39 and a half or something like that. I think they're gaming it so that she doesn't count as a full-time employee. She gets paid shit. I don't know how much she gets paid, but it can't be 10. It's got to be like less than $10 an hour, which is rough. And she doesn't have health insurance. She doesn't accumulate PTO. That's insane. If she wanted to take a day off, it would be unpaid. She works probably 8 hours a day. She gets breaks when they tell her to get breaks. And she went to work today. She said that she was going to get let out early because they cut her hours. And she wasn't sure. She went to work today, I think at 10:30, and she'll get off at 5. And she does not know if she's going to get a lunch today. I feel like that's fucked up. And that's like an issue with the company, of course, but it's an issue that the United States allows that to happen. I think that people on the lower end of society in terms of economics just don't have access to the same decency that the rest of the country should. Or maybe what I should say is most of the country does not have access to the things that I think that they should. And that is a job that treats them like a human being and a pay that gives them the ability to pay their bills. There's obviously an issue in this country with the fact that people don't really own anything anymore. People used to own land. People used to own their house. They used to buy shit and like own it, and it was an asset. And people don't do that. People rent everything. They finance their car. They rent their house. Like everything is in the door when they get their paycheck, and it's out the door immediately. And they don't hold on to any wealth. As we know, through compounding interest, wealth begets wealth. To have money, you have the ability to make more money. But to have no money, it's really hard to make money. It's hard to do anything really if you don't have any money. And I think that there's too many people in this country who don't have any money. That's, you could blame them. You could say like, okay, they should really save their money, put it away, and then like once they finally have enough cash, they can pay down their debts, they can buy a shitty car with cash, they can get themselves to a better job, like they can work their way up by their own bootstraps or whatever they call it. But I think that it is possible for the individual to do, but systematically the fact that it has to happen for so many people shows that there's an issue here. There's people in this country who have so much money that they don't even know what to do with it. They call it slosh. They say, people are sloshing around money, like they're just funding investments. They don't even know where to park their cash at this point. Like stocks are overvalued, real estate's overvalued. Like nobody knows like what to do with all of their money. And cash is not like the option, but it's just crazy that some of these people have so much money to play with that they're not even sure what they're supposed to be doing. And then there's all these people who really could use a little bit of money to pay their medical bills or at least, pay off their loans or something like that. It's fucked up. And the whole GameStop thing that just happened recently really shows that when a hedge fund goes under and they have to blow billions of dollars on purchasing the shorted stocks that they overshorted, that they lose their money and a hedge fund disappears and a couple of guys are out of work, and then they go get rolled into the other hedge funds and they continue to make plenty of money, I'm sure. But the money that came from GameStop and the winners that got that money changed their lives. So many people's lives were changed by the sliver of cash that came from that hedge fund. The overall idea here is that there's one person holding on to way too much money that they don't even know what to do with. And if it were redistributed, then it would elevate so many people in such a meaningful way. Just a couple $1,000s to each person in the United States would change the game for so many people. And for people to be holding on to millions, if not billions of dollars just because they want to, or because like they need to invest it somewhere else to make even more money, it just feels backwards to me. I think that in this country, we say that anyone can do anything and it's completely fair, like, even playing field, you could be a billionaire one day. But I think that realistically, we just are a country without a safety net. There's no bottom to how awful things can get for you and how bad your situation can become. But we do that at that is the price for having no ceiling to how high you can go. And without any constraints on our society, you can be totally in the fucking gutter or you can be astronomically rich with no limits. And I think, to me personally, it's not working. I don't think it works for our society to have a couple of people who make it to unimaginable levels of wealth so that millions of people can be struggling to live. That sucks. I think we need to put caps on the bottom and the top of that. Still can be a range of people. There can be people who are super rich. Can be people who are struggling. That's life. I don't think that it needs to be a completely level playing field where everybody gets the same government issue shoes and rations, and like that's communism. Like I don't think that that works either. People struggle against those kinds of systems because like if you work harder you should get better shit. Like I think that's fair enough to say. But I think that there needs to be some limits to how high that can go and how low that can go. Obviously, I'm not talking about like if you make over $100,000, we're going to take all your money. Like, what the fuck? That's not fair. But there are people in this country who hold on to so much money that they have multiple yachts, multiple mansions. They fly a helicopter everywhere they go, and like they're getting paid hundreds of $1,000s to speak at some seminar, and like their life is not reflective of reality at all. That can be curtailed in some way. It can be taken down a notch. And I think that they can still live an incredibly wealthy life, but maybe we cut the icing off the cake a little bit so that some people can't end up homeless or like people are guaranteed health care. There are some basic things that I think that we need to address for a lot of people, and that can be done through more accountability in how the rich operate. A lot of rich people, they're holding on to a ton of wealth, but it's not necessarily just sitting in their bank account. It's sitting in their corporations, it's sitting in their investments, it's in certain places so that it's not like that person necessarily has a lot of wealth. They just have like a high net worth because they own some of these assets. And I think that when you park your money in clever ways, it's really easy to avoid taxes. And that's very apparent in how, I mean, you hear Amazon paid like couple $1,000s in taxes, but they can really game the system so that they don't really have to pay a lot of that. But everybody knows that Amazon and Jeff Bezos are like way over the top in terms of wealth. It's just fucked up because a lot of the people who work for Amazon are struggling to make it if they're driving the trucks or if they're fulfilling the orders while the company is taking in record levels of wealth. Like, there's an issue here. The people at the top of the company are taking too much for themselves, and the people at the bottom who are really working to create the value that is Amazon are not really seeing a return on their labor. They're not getting a fair share of the profits that are created from the actual work that they do. I think that there needs to be a better system of accountability and auditing on the 1% of the United States, the most rich people and those huge companies. I think that some of these companies need to be analyzed closely so that they can't just park their money offshore so that they can claim that they didn't make any money or play around with different credits and regulations and stuff so that they don't have to pay as many taxes. Like, we really need to take like an honest look at some of this shit. Look at the people who are making too much money and not just take it from them because we want it. I don't think that that's right. You can't just say, well, fuck the rich, like we need their money, like people need it, and like just, take all their money. That's robbery. But We need a system of accountability so that they are actually paying their fair share. And I think fair share is really what it comes down to. Is like we need to set expectations of what they're supposed to be paying, and then we need to hold them to it. And it can't be a system that's easily duped and that they can just kind of swerve around and they just get to keep all their money. It just doesn't, it's not working. So I think it's not fair to just take everyone's money and then give it to everybody else. Like, you can't do that. I think people do have a right to property, but there needs to be a way that we can look at how they are parking their money, where they're putting it, how they're managing it, and penalize people from taking too much or keep people from taking too much. Maybe there needs to be like a limitation to what a CEO can take home in relation to the average salary of their company. Because I know that in other companies, or excuse me, other countries like, Japan or Germany or something like that, the CEO might make 4 times the average employee, or they might make like 10 times the average. I think in the US it's like 100. It's like you make like 100 times as much as the average employee at your company. It's fucked up. Like, you can't do that. Like, that's not fair. Yes, you do own the company. You can do whatever you want, but that is feudalism. And we have a country of democracy. And yeah, a company is not a country, but if you're going to operate a company within a country, I feel like it should reflect the values of the country. And we have these companies where the CEO is the king and he can do whatever he wants and he can come and go as he pleases. He can fire anyone for no reason. He can set his own salary. And these people are working for the company because it's better to collect breadcrumbs than to fucking starve on nothing. But I think that people are being shafted. It's not fair. There needs to be increased regulations on companies in terms of workers' rights and in terms of corporate tax and a wealth tax on individuals who are just holding on to too much money. This video is too long. I've kind of rambled, but the point still stands. I think that number one, our issue is existential. Climate change is the number one issue. It's going to be costly. We can't just hold back because, like, the oil pipeline, the jobs, the money, like, there's not going to be jobs. There's not going to be money. We're going to be fucked if we don't do something about climate change. I know some people don't even believe it. Whatever. Go fuck yourself. It's real. Like, I don't know how else to explain it, but climate change is number one. Number two is that our government should work for us. We should not be working for the government. I think that we need more transparency and security in our elections. We need term limits on politicians, and we need to end bullshit corruption like gerrymandering. And finally, I think that inequality is a huge issue that our country is facing, and that through accountability and through proper taxation and auditing of companies and individuals, we can collect the wealth that we're entitled to. Not the wealth that we think that we should have, but just the wealth that we truly are entitled to, and that will change the game for so many people. I think in combination, all of those things could really help our country out. I think that that's kind of what people need. It might not be what people want, but I guess that's why you run for president. Like, if they don't want it, they won't vote for me. They probably wouldn't. I don't think I'd ever be president. I don't even think I'd ever fucking run. But if I did, that's what I'd do. And if you don't like it, don't vote for me.